I hope you guys keep safe. We need to cut the costs very quickly and take new changes and identify areas where the cost is not 100% under the control and take the actions immediately to change it. In this video, I will show you three things. Actually, how plywood merchants are making more money from you by selling you cheaper plywood. I'll show you two examples how clients have changed that and fixed it based on two projects. They allowed me to share the emails and stuff. I'll show you. And more importantly, I'll show you three actions that you need to take to make the changes happen. So plywood merchants are making around 1.5 pounds per sheet. And the gross profit is, if you pay 28 pounds per sheet, around 5% gross profit. So, and they can't increase the price because market is very competitive. But what they could do is they could increase the volume that they sell to you. So what they have done in the past year, they come to the buyer and you say, hey, I have this plywood, it does the same job and it costs less. You say, happy days, let's go. But what is hard for buyer to monitor is how many reuses you actually get out of the ply. And what happens is this cheaper ply doesn't last as long. Now have a look at this 18-story building example. You buy 1,000 sheets, 28 pounds each, and in the best case scenario, it will last 9 floors. So at the middle of the building, you need to buy more plywood. Now, at the end, you'll spend 1,000 sheets. On the other hand, you have better plywood. It costs more, 33 pounds, but you need to buy only one set because it will last all the way up. I'll show you an exact example from the job site and a customer feedback that confirms that. So you can see on the left side you spent 28,000 pounds for cheaper plywood, which supposedly was a good deal. But on the right side it's only 16. So you can see the big difference straight away. Here on the left is the cheap plywood, which normally gives 5 to 8 reuses because people on the side will cut it up and it will last even less. And on the right side is good plywood, similar type of plywood that formwork companies are using on the formwork, and they use it because it lasts longer, it's less cost for them. So here is an example from 18-story building in London. So customer have bought one set of European birch plywood, and he's using gas tables here. So the plywood is used only from the one side. You can see the underside is still untouched, it's brand new. He's on the 13th floor and he has 5 more floors to go, and with the same plywood. Here's an email from owner of the company. He says, Gins, we have completed the 13 floors with the same ply and intend to continue to use this for the remaining 5 floors. Subject to final condition, we expect to reuse the same ply for another project. So the saving is obvious. So in the numbers, for area of 2,800 square meters, you need 2 sets of the cheap ply, and you would spend 58,000 pounds for 2 sets. For comparison, you can buy good ply, which will last all the way through the building. You spend 33 pounds a sheet, and the total cost is 31 pounds. That's 27 pounds difference. So ask your accounts how much money you've spent on the plywood in 2019. If it was 800,000 as an example, and you could save 46%, divided by 12, that's 36,000 per month. Now, the previous job was a gas tables, as I mentioned. In most of the cases, we have fix and strike jobs. On the fix and strike jobs, the consumption of the cheap plywood is even worse because there is uncontrolled cutting of the plywood. If you send to the site one type of plywood, you leave it up to the workers how much plywood they will cut it up, and you know that in most of the cases they'll take the sheet closest to them, will cut it up to put it for infills. But what is the high suggestion here is that you send them two different plywoods. One is the good plywood, which must be reused and can't be cut at all, and that's 80% of the good ply, and 20% of the cheapest possible ply, which they are allowed only to use for cutting. So here you can see example. All around is European type birch plywood, and only around the column you see the plywood for cutting. So when he goes to the next floor, he's not going to cut more plywood. He's going to use again only the cheapest plywood. What you will see immediately, the construction managers, your construction managers, will see that the volume of ply going into skips will reduce significantly. Now, second suggestion is you need to use half-size birch boards. Now you can see on the left customers using full sheets, and the yellow area is where he needs to cut for infills, and it's 23%. If you're using half-size boards, you can fill much bigger area and you save 14% on the cutting. So another thing with the half-size boards, why customers prefer it is because striking is more controlled and they damage them significantly less. I'll run this video. Imagine if this would be a full sheet, you would have probably two guys to take it, but also when they're striking from double height, they will never handle the full sheets like this. They will just let them drop down and the plywood will be damaged, which of course reduces the lifetime of the ply.
Looks very easy.
And you see on the picture on the right side, since they are made with all edges sealed and it's a half size, they treat it not as a consumable, but they treat it as equipment, and they stack it nicely. And here you'll see example how this is from the same job, the plywood that came back, and it's ready to go out on another job. I will show you email. This is email from the project manager. They've used it at least 10 times, most likely more, since they can use the both sides of the ply. And they've noticed the less cutting for of the cheap ply for infills. And well, they say initially it took more time to install, but once the guys got used to these, it was faster, especially on the striking. It is handy and guys like it, but when brand new, first pour is more slippery, next pour is fine. On the first pour, you're not supposed to use the oil in it. It will strike very easy anyway. So three important actions is use good quality plywood that has more than 20 reuses. You will end up spending less money immediately. Control the cutting. So don't send one type of the ply to the site and let the people cut whichever sheet they want. Send them 80% of the good ply, 20% of the cheap ply, and this way you know that they're not going to cut the most of them. Now use half boards because they are less damaged, and the people mindset is completely different. They use half boards as a equipment. They treat them better. You see, they send them back to the site nicely, and on the next job you have already 80% of the plywood. You don't have to buy it again. Whereas if you use cheap plywood, it all goes into the skips at the end of the job. In most of the cases you have to pay for the skips. Yeah. And the last thing is, when you're using half boards, the good plywood, and you're paying premium initially for it, ask the supplier to go to the site and give a toolbox talk to show the pictures of the case studies as a good practice so that people take the best out of it. And this way, your cost is under the control. So I hope this video is helpful for you, and customers that know me, I'm always happy to go and help and talk to the guys on the site. And if you are thinking that plywood is the area where you can cut the cost, reach out to me and we'll help each other. Thanks. Bye bye.